Today's guest is Anca Trifan, who is the founder, creator, and CEO for Trifan Events, which is a women-owned boutique technical event planning and production agency that provides the strategy, the technology, and gear to host a successful virtual or hybrid event. And Anca has worked in event production for almost 20 years and has extensive experience and knowledge. In addition to that, she's also the host of the Events Demystified, which is a tactical podcast for anyone in the industry, whether they're a beginner or a pro. So, Anca, thank you very much for being here. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am doing great, aside from a few glitches related not to technical issues, but eyelashes.
That's
I bet
okay.
that's a first. I bet it's a first on your show.
You know what?
Somebody
It is
to
a first.
admit they had issues with their eyelashes getting on live.
Absolutely. It is definitely a first with the eyelashes. You're also one of the few that I mentioned to you at the beginning that has like a similar background to me as
Very
far as
cool.
in the camera. So I'm always appreciative of that. It's like, like one of those ode to like great minds think alike type of thing. So for anybody who's watching on YouTube, you'll get to see what I'm talking about. But yeah,
We have a
outside of
similar background. I love it because, as in, probably not the technical professional background that we're talking about. We're talking about the actual library bookcase background. Okay, just in case anybody's wondering, like, what are you guys talking about? I thought this was a coaching type of thing. What's that to do with
correct.
event productions?
100%. And I mean, I can't speak for yourself, but I always say, this is my strategically placed background to make me look smarter than I am. So, yeah, you know what I mean? I
Do
get
you
it.
have people that come back to you later, especially since you have a video cast like I do, and they would zoom in to see what type of books you've got that you're reading, and they're like, "Oh, I see you reading. You're really into Brené Brown. Like, how did you know?" Well, it was on your shelf.
I don't know if they go back and they zoom in. I've had people that would like point out a book and be like, "Is that book?" And I'd be like, "Yes, it is." And then like that sparks. So it's usually that, or like people will see the sword at the top of my bookshelf and they'll comment on that, like, "Well, it's kind of weird. Like, why do you have a sword
That's
at the
funny.
top?" But yeah, so it doesn't happen all the time, but like it happens from time to time for sure.
That's awesome. Well, now that that's out of the way, what shall we talk about today, Drasco?
So we are going to spend our time talking about you, right? 'Cause at the end of the day,
Oh
that's
no, I thought we're
what
talking
show is
about
about.
you, your sword, your books. Come on.
Well, no, this will be for a different time and a different podcast. But no, in this instance, as a guest coming on, the focus is going to be on you. So with that segue, I'd love to know more about what you do, because even I think the just kind of very stereotypical reading just that background, not knowing anything about you, this is not like a typical role that I feel like we'd find a woman in that does like all this production and gear. Like it's like you think of that, like you usually think of a guy. So I'd love to know how you got into doing it and are passionate enough to like make this business out of it. So floor is yours to break that down.
All right. Well, you're not wrong there. It's definitely a very prevalent stereotype that I had to work hard to break. I'm still working hard at breaking. It's the work is not yet done and finished. So it's definitely a process and it's a long journey in the making. But to go back a little bit into my background, I'm originally from Romania, for anyone that is sensing an accent, because I always get asked. And through high school and college, I worked in radio, and that was super fun. But when I moved to US, and I moved to US because actually I looked for opportunities in event productions. And when I say event production, I actually mean audio visual event production and technology. And back in Romania, even, I mean, to this day, there's very little opportunities for women to find a career, a serious career that they would be taken seriously and they would be able to flourish in that on that path. So what that meant for me is raising some money, doing things, selling illegal CDs. Oh shoot, I shouldn't say that. But again, I was working in radio. I
That was my
didn't
first
know a
business
lot
as
at the
well. So
time.
I
Okay,
get it. Yeah.
in my defense.
Yeah, I get it.
So I raised enough money to get me to US, and I literally had like $150 in my pocket when I got to US, and I had to hustle to figure out what am I going to do now. And at the time, I was very insecure about my accent, so going into radio wasn't going to be the next path forward, because I figured, well, nobody wants to hear a Romanian speaking English. So I decided, well, what is one thing that I really, really enjoyed as I was behind the microphone? And I realized it was the mixing board, right? It was the audio part of the radio setup and production that I was passionate about. So I wanted to learn more about that. So long story short, it got me from the East Coast to the West Coast, in LA, and I started working for several event production companies, from the bottom up. I basically got to a production house doors, knocked to the door, and I said, I'm really good with computers. I graduated in computers. I can fix your computers, but let me learn about event production. Let me learn about what you guys are doing and how can I get better at mixing. By then, I started volunteering to a few churches to do sound mixing. And let me tell you, churches can always use volunteers. So they were like, yes, do this and do that. And I learned from the bottom up everything that was to learn. And then eventually I started going to school as well to polish some of the skills that I was learning hands on. And I ended up mixing a lot of fun shows, A-listers, not dropping names, but just like Fergie, Linkin Park, even Michael Jackson for a little cameo of that was some type of a 50th bash for a really big fashion designer in LA. It was a lot of fun. Eventually, I grew tired and burned out because as a woman in event production, that by itself, it's almost like an oxymoron, but it's very long hours. 18 hours days is very common, and then you constantly go to the next show. And doing 7 years of that, it was a lot of work. And I am, I'm the energizer bunny. I never stop, but you can still burn out even when you have plenty of stamina and energy. So eventually I decided to move to Portland, Oregon and start something else. And that was more of a event production for corporate events. And that's more like a lesser, um, how should I say, a lesser manual work. It's more of a technical planning that goes behind producing some of those galas and some of those conferences, but without having to do such amount of manual work with like loading trucks and moving from one location to another that live sound reinforcement usually has and involves. So I did a few years of that, and that's when I decided to start my own agency, because by then I started having clients that were coming to me for my own skills and wanting to get my own expertise and advice. And I was like, well, why am I doing this for someone else when I can be doing it for myself? It was definitely a leap of faith, because as a woman, you don't have as much support as you would with a guy surrounded by a bunch of other guys. And I can't just have a crew of girls like supporting me, because none of them were interested. My girlfriends are interested in other things, and that's fine. But I needed to figure out, how do I build this agency while working with a lot of different personalities. And some of the personalities in event production has very strong personalities, as we know, full of pride and full of ego. And even to this day, like, you try to go and show men how to do something, they're like, I know better, even though they have no fucking idea what they're talking about. But that's a different story and a different topic for another podcast. So long story short, I started my own agency. I've been doing this for quite a few years now. COVID hit, and for me, actually, that was a blessing in disguise. Not that COVID was a good thing, but it did propel me from like a small agency, localize it to just a zip code or to a whatever, a state, basically to a national and a global playground, because I started working on virtual events that had no location, and it could have been anywhere from everywhere. And that has really propelled me into the next stage of growth. And now that we're going back to in person, and we have been for a year and a half, it's definitely a bit challenging, because my headroom as far as expenses go, when I was working virtual events, virtual conferences, a lot of medical conferences from my own office, I had a very small expense of operation when it came to doing my business. Now, when I go out on events, there's a completely different dynamic. For one, you do have to hire crews, and you have to hire local potential labor, if available. Labor is in high demand, qualified labor. Gear transporting from one location to another, it involves a lot of expense, trucking, and all the things that go, logistically, things that go into large events. And that just can make your take home so much smaller, while you're putting so much more effort into this one event, right? So, and the timelines are so much shorter now. Everybody's kind of waiting until last minute to do events. So to all of that to say, I've realized just this year alone that I was still going 100 miles an hour, and I wasn't necessarily turning profit as much as I was for the years prior. And one of the main reasons for that is because I was trying to have a hold on all the things myself, which is never a good thing, but I am a bit of a control freak. So here we go. And like all business owners, you kind of want to have your hands in everything. And it's hard to, let go of some of the things that that you will take it from A to Z, and you'll accomplish it. Unless all the plates just like, start dropping, which is not a good idea. But then to make things even more interesting, because why not? I mean, aside from running a business, traveling a lot, producing a podcast, actually producing several podcasts for some of my clients as well, aside from my own, I decided that I'm going to do a bodybuilding competition, which is coming up next weekend. So I've been suffering for the last month. I've been like hangry like nobody's business, because I was in such a low carb grammage, per day. Very, very strict regime. And anybody that's done professional bodybuilding, they know how you go through, the building, bulking stage, and you carb up, and it's so much fun. And then when you get to the cutting stage, especially in the prep part of um, the whole training, you are close to starving, not because you want to be starving, but because you really need to cut, and that just means you're you're hangry. And I am one of those hangry people, and I'm like, I can't wait for this week to be over so I can go and eat a pot, a good meal, like a pasta meal, like something that I haven't had in months. So challenging myself to the next level is what I would call this season, because I've not just mentally challenged myself to learn a lot of new technology for the last 2-3 years, especially with the onset of virtual events. And that comes with new softwares and new technology and new gear and new way of doing events, right? But then I decided, okay, I'm going to work on my body now, and I'm going to challenge myself and take myself to the next level to see how far can I take before I break. And that's kind of like sort of like my mantra in life. How far can I push things before they break? And right now, I'll be honest, I just the other day, this weekend, I'm like, man, I'm in so much pain, like physically. I'm running, like I have to run about 8 to 9 miles a day. And then I do 2 workouts, 2 hours a day of like weightlifting. And all those things has been like for days upon days upon days, no rest for the last 3 months, like ongoing. And I'm like, I think I've reached my breaking point. I think I'm done. Like if this week is not over anytime soon, I'm really done. I'm gonna be like, that's it. Like screw this. This is not worth it. So this is a great conversation because you catch me in the moment of like all the things, when all the things kind of meet at this pinnacle point where the business, the fall of events is upon us. And for anyone that's in events, usually that means a lot of events coming finally happening, because usually summer is a little slower, and September is going to be crazy, October is going to be crazy, so will November. There's people still deciding what they're going to do with some of their September events, and we're like, there is no time. If you haven't decided by now, you're kind of screwed, because it's going to cost you double the amount that you thought you're going to pay in the first place, just because availability of, again, qualified labor is a big problem. A lot of people that were really good at what they were doing in AV production and technology, they found other careers over COVID because they were out of job. They were out of, a bread of sustaining themselves, and they realize, in the process, oh wait, I can actually do something else and make the same amount of money and not be so stressed. That's amazing. So they never came back. So all that to say, it's a crazy, crazy season that I am living in. But I want to look back at it and say, gosh darn it, I did it. And that's another one of those takes that if I can do it, I will do it well, and I will never break promises that I made to myself. I will never just stop doing it because it's hard. And running a business is hard by itself. But then adding a family, adding other hobbies, preparing for a competition, those are additional, I guess, elements of surprise that maybe people should do them separately. I just like to put them all in one big pot and see what comes out of there. So I don't know. Did I bore everyone now with the super long story?
So I don't think you
Stop me. Do stop me
were
when
boring
I talk
anyone,
too much.
and that's fair. I have no issues doing that. It's just I think it highlights, as you said, the season that you are in, which is there is a lot, right? It's a lot pushing onto potentially too much, right? Like you already said, you're exploring where is that line where I can push before they break, and I feel like I've gotten there. And yes, bodybuilding competitions, absolutely the most brutal thing to put on your plate right before you get into your busy season. Absolutely makes sense. So what I'm curious about then is, like, you have this vast experience that's clearly brought on by a passion for this, right? Like anybody isn't going to go through the journey that you went through to kind of carve your own path into somewhere where, quote unquote, like you're not supposed to be carving your path unless you were passionate about it. So like there's clearly love there. There's clearly all this work. You seem to be moving in the right direction. You were saying, okay, the business, while it wasn't profitable as much when the overhead was low, still profitable, still moving well. So what is it that you are struggling with right now?
That's a fantastic question, because I have certainly had to ask myself that, because this season, while um again, going back to this seasonality of events, generally speaking, there used to be a seasonality of events before COVID, and I feel like a lot of us have sort of still mentally got locked into that. But COVID, and then now that we're kind of like endemic time, nobody knows where we're at right with that. While some people are ready to go back in person, others are just not, even though we've been sort of gathering for quite a few months now. What that means is that we were thinking that spring and fall are our busiest seasons, and usually that's when we work really hard in my field, in my niche, and then we kind of rest a little bit over the summer. So even my thinking with getting into a competition in the beginning of the year in January, when I made that decision, to actively pursue it, even though I was training, up to that point just for myself, just because I wanted mentally to feel healthy, and then adding the physical aspect doesn't hurt, just to be able to have enough energy and stamina to keep going, because every time you go into a event, you need that to be at the highest level. So when I was playing with this dream, this idea of like pursuing this bodybuilding, and it's just for everyone that's listening, there's different federations, there's different kinds. I'm doing the bikini natural bodybuilding, so on top of everything, I can't even take anything. Like it has to be, it's all on me. I either show up or I don't show up, and that's it. And when I was playing with this idea, I was betting that my summer was going to be a slow season. I was betting that I would have time and I would do all my workouts and just push hard through the summer and just enjoy my time off, right? Not so much, because what happened, because of all the events that were sort of postponed due to Omicron last fall, and then uncertainties with budget and recessions, everybody that was going to have an event in the spring, they pushed it in the summer. So then once of a sudden, I was traveling a lot in the summer. Every week, basically I was traveling 3 weeks out of the month. So every other week I was gone. And those are long weeks where you're gone on the road, in hotel rooms, ballrooms, away from your nutrition, away from your gym, away from your regular setup, to be totally out of your comfort zone. And that's when I was like, oh, shoot, I'm screwed. Like, this is not what the plan was. Like, what happened? Yes, I could have said no. And yes, I have said no to certain opportunities, right? But then there was also some really good opportunities that I knew if I do say no, they're not going to come again, because they were linked with certain partnerships and linked with certain clients and certain events, right? So that's where this whole convolution of everything, coming to this pinnacle point of like, okay, this is when things are breaking. This is when all those balls juggling in the air, are falling. And the hope is that some of those balls that are falling can bounce back, and they're not glass balls, and they're not going to break when they hit the ground, right? So with that being said, the challenge right now is to allow myself to hire help. And I've played with this idea of having someone that I can have, part-time part of the agency, doing the things that I don't need to be doing. And there's a lot of things I don't need to be doing, and establishing in my mind what those things are. And because I do outsource a lot of the production elements, and I do outsource some things, and I have a team of people that I work with for events. But when it comes to the operation aspect of the business, when it comes to like the admin part, the answering emails, the social media marketing, the writing the blogs, the maintaining the newsletter, all those things that go into that part of the business, do I really have to do that myself? That was the question, right? And allowing myself to say, actually, you can give the instruction, or you can give sort of like top level, here's what I'm looking for, and allow someone else to do it. And breaking away from having to have control over such an important part of my business, because that's my voice. Like, to have someone else write my newsletter feels like a little like fake to me, right? Because that's my voice coming through that newsletter when it reaches my customers, it reaches my clients or my potential clients. And if somebody else's voice is it comes through, then it's not authentic to me. So I guess finding that balance, how can I make this work in a way that I don't lose, the culture that I'm trying to build here? I don't lose my voice. I don't lose, who I am authentically showing up as a business, while still, assigning some of those responsibilities to someone else that is fully capable of doing them. The question is, will they be able to fully do them as I would do them myself? Probably not. I know the answer to that, but I'm still struggling with having to let go, having to embrace the fact that I don't have to do everything myself.
Got it. Okay. So was there a period in your life where you weren't going 100 miles an hour?
I don't think so. I'm afraid the answer is probably not.
Okay. So for as long as you can remember, if you didn't have a to-do list that
I
was
would create one.
longer, that yeah, I would create one. And what I was going to allude to was, so traditionally when you have slow time to recover for the busy time that's coming up. So my summers are low time to recover for the fall, which is going to be crazy busy. I get antsy because there's a gap in my schedule and I decide to put one of the most demanding things I could possibly put onto it, which is to do a bikini competition for bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Right. So is that more familiar and comfortable to you than time
Resting and time
for
off,
rest and
absolutely,
relaxation?
100%. I do
Okay.
struggle with productivity issues where I feel like I have to show something for myself. Like I have to do something. I have something that I work on, because if I don't feel productive. And I was trying to think, just like now that I'm like mentally exhausted from all the training, I'm like, what does rest look like for normal people? And I was just trying to like run through a few scenarios in my mind. I'm like, do they just sit on the sofa and watch Netflix? Would that be pleasurable? I'm wondering. I don't know, because I usually always do two, three things: either jump rope when I watch Netflix, or fold clothes, or cook, or do something else.
Right. I maximize the productivity of my rest.
Exactly.
Right.
So I'm like, what would people do, like if they had time on their hands? How would they rest well? I'm still struggling with finding the answer to that for myself.
Okay. So are you cool to explore that a bit deeper?
Sure, let's do
Okay.
it.
So if you were to just rest, how does that make you feel even just thinking about it?
Tired.
To rest makes you feel tired.
Yes.
Okay. So tell me more about that. Like, is it physiologically tired or mentally tired?
I think so. Let's just say, just to give an example, right? So I love to go hiking. I love to go in the nature. I love to go backpacking. I do that quite a lot on weekends when I'm not working some event. And so the other I think it was a few weeks ago, I was taking a few girls, I think it was like 5 or 6 of us. I was taking them on this backpacking adventure for the first time. And I was leading them to a mountain lake, super nice. I mean, I'm from Idaho. There's beautiful mountains and lakes here. And one of the girls, I didn't realize, but she was a complete beginner, like 100% green, never done anything like that, hasn't even like camped, let alone go backpacking. So she thought it was a great idea. And here I was, ready to go and do this hike, do this trail, accomplish it in a couple of hours time. I knew how long it is. I knew the elevation gain, and I'm like, we're ready to go. We're going to set camp. It's going to be amazing. So now I'm going at a snail pace on this incline. And to me, that is death by 1,000 pieces, because going slow, it just makes it longer and it makes it harder, because now I'm carrying this 40-pound backpack up a incline that, instead of going fast to be done with it, I'm just gonna go as slow as it can go. And my mind like cannot compute that, because I'm thinking I'm wasting resources. So to your question, how does rest feel like to me? It's like wasting resources when I could be doing all those things that I still want to do, because life is short. So that by default, that mentally makes me tired, because I'm thinking, oh God, I'm already behind. If I'm wasting resources now, then I'm already behind, a week's worth of work just by resting 2 hours.
Yep. Okay. So that's interesting because I asked you basically, okay, if you were to imagine yourself resting right now, your brain defaulted to, well, that would be tiring. And here's the example that I have of why that would be
Hmm.
tiring. So the example of rest, or at least the association your brain has with rest, is I'm going to take a 40-pound pack and walk slower, therefore making this whole thing harder. So the association with rest is like it's actually harder.
Yeah.
So does that resonate with you first and foremost?
Well, that's basically putting it in so many words. Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Okay. And that's fair. Do you think that is actually a productive view of rest?
I don't think so. I definitely feel like there's it's messed up. There's something that gone really wrong at one point, where I feel like the reason why I need to constantly be feeling productive is it has to do with my upbringing or the expectations that were set on me, as a child or as a firstborn, who knows. Also, raised in a country that, by all accounts at the time, was a third world country, and having that drive, that it's a very I have a very big drive, but it's a very like it's a very harsh master in a sense, like a lot of people, that I know, and they're like, you're so ambitious and you're so driven. I'm like, yeah, it's true, but it's a very harsh master to work under, because nothing will be enough. You will always constantly keep going and push harder to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Even when you finished and completed one thing, you're gonna chase the next one, right? So in so many ways, that's why rest doesn't have space there, because you're not making your drive happy when you decide to just drop things and stop. Like, wait a second, we had this plan, what happened? We need to keep going. You're wasting time. Tick tock, keep moving. Those are the
Right.
conversations I have with myself in my head all the
So it
time.
kind of seems like like even with all the things I do get done and all the things I do accomplish, this harsh master fundamentally, like, it's never enough. So if I
Exactly.
rest, like, not only is that not enough, but, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost like shameful. Like, I'm
Yeah,
already
exactly.
not, but there's shame in,
Definitely.
like, yeah,
Guilt and shame, probably. Guilt, very much guilt associated with the fact that you're failing yourself by stopping. You're failing yourself, and I could not do that. And yeah. It's almost like we're diving into a Brené Brown book right now, because I'm definitely
you
reading,
certainly are, yes.
I'm
So
reading quite a few right now, and they're amazing. But it's the type of stuff that I know that I've got to put some work into.
100%. So, okay, are you okay if we dive deeper
Go.
onto, like, this
Go for
string?
it.
Okay, perfect. The other part I'm gonna ask you is, when you answer, I want you to imagine that you can only answer in, like, 10-word sentences at a time,
Okay. Are you
okay?
saying I talk too much?
No, I'm not all saying you talk too much. What I am saying is, your brain, because you are so articulate, and because you do, like, there's like 10 million things always happening, and there's this idea and then that idea, okay? It gets extremely easy for your brain to hijack those stories
Mhm.
and keep you away from what is at the core. So
Right.
the reason that I'm asking you to do this is, by limiting how much you can say at a time, I want you to really tune in and extract the essence, as opposed to, like, the verbiage around
Mhm.
what it is
Okay.
that's coming forward. Okay.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Okay, perfect. So in that case, as far as, like, this harsh master and being aware that, well, nothing I do is really good enough. So if I rest, like, now I'm shamed into that because it's already not good, and I'm taking time off. So, like, now I'm, like, horrible. I'm whatever the inner dialogue is for you, right? It's almost like the disgusting feeling
Mhm.
in it. And correct me if I'm wrong with that. Um, is that how you want to live?
Definitely not. And the reason why I am taking, intentional steps towards unearthing some of that, what you just said, I think for me is more connected to worthiness. It's
Correct.
am I
Okay,
like,
so just pause right there, and I'm gonna interrupt you more now, just for that
yeah,
same reason. Okay, so are you okay with that?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So if I don't accomplish all of the things, what does that mean about you?
I'm not worthy of something. Like I'm not worthy of being part of this
Okay,
game,
so
not being
pause right
worthy
there.
of whatever it is that I'm engaged in.
Okay. So I'm not worthy of something. I'm not worthy, and this is just for my own clarification, of the thing that I'm engaged in. So what do you mean by that?
Like say if I, for example, this competition, right? If I were to take it slow and not do everything at 150%, right? Because, I have a routine and I have a fitness coach and she gives me a certain reps, certain number of reps. I always overdo. I'm always overachiever and I would do double the amount. And that's constantly on and on and on, right? So in my mind, I'm thinking if I don't do it because I know I can, I'm not worthy to step up on stage and show up like everyone else does. Because in my mind, I know I'm capable of pushing, and so I will.
Right. So pause right there. And just for your own context, so I owned a brick and mortar weight loss center for 10 years.
Hmm.
I've then done a bodybuilding competition, but I've done
Right,
photo
right.
shoots. So I understand the week prior to carb loading and all of that stuff. It's not fun. So I get
No,
all of it.
it's like
Um,
my energy like come
yeah,
from
yeah.
0% everything.
I get it. So what I found interesting with that share is like you hired a coach to take the thinking out of like what do I got to eat, how
Hmm.
much do I got to train, what's my volume, what's my progress, like to answer all of those thinking questions.
Yeah,
If you trust them and they give you a particular rep range, right, and you
yeah,
double it or you go whatever
yeah.
more than what's on that rep range, is there a scenario where that could actually work against you?
100%. I mean, first off, uh, I'm making myself more exhausted and fatigued, right?
Correct. And also,
Secondly,
where's your progress made, right?
it can be frustrating for the coach too. Like I can imagine being a coach and being like, okay, I created this program for you. Please follow it. Like, yes,
100%.
I will try.
And also, where is the actual building done? Is it in the rest and recovery or in the training?
See, for me, it's like in the training, I gotta push, I gotta push, I
I
gotta
understand
push.
what is for you, but where is it actually happening
Well, that's
physiologically?
where it has to be determined because I realized I did not give myself, my body enough rest time. And now, it's coming towards the end of this, and I am totally 100% exhausted. And also, my body doesn't work with me as it should because I didn't give it enough rest periods prior to the cutting, right? It's like if you're bulking up and you never actually give it rest, when you have to take it up a notch yet more for cardio to lose
Right.
that
That's
fat,
fine. I understand all those
yeah, you
pieces.
have
But right.
no more bandwidth. And that's what I
Correct.
realized because I didn't rest in the first place. Now I left myself without that headroom.
So again, the result of this harsh master and this attitude towards
Yeah.
work, did it actually give you
Pan
the
out
outcome you
well.
wanted?
No, it just made me more exhausted and fatigued.
Correct. Right? Further reinforcing the inherent belief that I'm
Yeah,
actually not working hard enough. This is just more evidence that I'm not worthy of the thing that I want.
right.
How does that land for you?
It lands like I 100% am aware of it. And the question becomes, how do I fix it? Because I I tend to be most cases a problem solver, and I don't have, I don't necessarily give enough time to wallowing in, okay, disillusion or the fact that, oh gosh, now all is lost. There is no hope, there is no opportunity moving forward. Yeah, it sucks. I know this is who I am. I know this is what I do. I know this is not the best way forward. What do I need to do now to fix it? What do I need to do to, like allow myself to do things right so that I don't do the, Murphy's Law, uh, do a bunch of things the same and expect different results every time because that's not going to work.
Correct. So there's a few things that I would highlight as observations to what you just said, right?
Speed about. My brain wants to hear
I know. So that's actually
what
number
he
two. So
already
I'll start with
knows.
that one.
But you know what I mean? It's like when somebody else tells them to you, you're like, okay, maybe they're right.
So fair enough. But what I just want to highlight to you is look at how impatient your brain is to hear, okay, well, what do I do?
Right.
I.e., what thing do I have to add to my task list to get rid of this problem?
Yep.
Right? Kind of sounds like the thing that got you in the
The
problem to
first
begin with,
in the
right?
problem. Yeah.
Correct. So
Yep.
that's number one. Number two, you said it in passing, and I don't know if you noticed it or not, but you're like, this is who I am,
Right.
right? So your identity as of this conversation right now is extremely rooted in finding worthiness, value, self-acceptance, and significance in like how hard can I push?
Right.
Finding ways that I can break myself to the detriment of the results that I want. Right? I have no issues like if you allocated 3 months to whatever bodybuilding competition, you're like, let's see how hard I can do this on plan. I think that that's a very ambitious, cool thing to do. However, given your experience and what you shared, it's like, no, I self-sabotaged the best results I could have gotten from this. So you are like the flip coin of what most people associate with self-sabotage, where it's inaction and meekness and stagnating that usually people associate with self-sabotage. For you,
Right.
it's
The
I'm
opposite.
gonna work like crazy and slam my head into the wall and
I'll push through the
sabotage the
wall if
result.
I have to, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
My pain does not matter because I am chasing the thing to give me the significance that I lack internally. For
Yeah.
most self-sabotaging people, it's the opposite. It's I can't get myself to move because I
Yeah.
lack like significance. You overcorrect on
Yeah.
the other instance, right? So I
Yeah.
think, well, before I go on, how does that land for you?
Very accurate to, thanks for the therapy session.
Well, this is just a surface level bit, but yeah, you're starting to scratch on that. This is
Yes.
less about doing and more about healing,
Yeah.
right? And it came into that statement of this is who I am,
Yeah.
right? The longer your identity stays rooted in my worthiness is found through my work ethic, the longer this is going to persist. So this is
Right.
really a big, like what's in front of you basically is what I'm saying is you have to heal the parts of you that have concluded that about the world. You have to heal the parts of you that have never given the light to like ask, what is it that I actually want? Meaning, like, I know what you want to achieve as far as performance, but like, what is it that I actually want as a being? Like, how do I want to
Mhm.
exist? What does
Mhm.
peace look like for me? What does achievement without, burnout and exhaustion actually look like? What does joy in rest and in recovery and introspection and like appreciating the things that I do have in being enough? Like, what does that actually look like? So one aspect of that is actively healing all those pieces. And then the other part, which I know you're going to be more prone to, is how do I begin to embody that with the right actions? With
Mhm.
going through the discomfort of delegating things, right? Going through the discomfort of saying no, going through the discomfort of being single-minded when I am taking a rest, not jumping rope and folding laundry and like just actually sitting with the discomfort. Like all I'm doing is just watching a
Yeah.
Netflix show, right? Like I know it sounds crazy, that is uncomfortable, but like for you,
I
you're
know
more
some people
comfortable
are
like
like, "What is wrong with you?" Yes,
correct, right?
I
For you, it's
agree.
like if there's 10 people talking to me and I'm trying to text while also like juggling a very important
That sounds
decision, like
like a
that's more
very
comfortable.
productive
Correct. That's more comfortable
Netflix
than
and
just sitting here
chill.
watching stuff, right? So it's going to be that balance of like
Yeah.
the inner healing and then the active embodiment of that as you go to your day-to-day life. Cumulatively, that's what upgrades your identity into the version of you that still achieves things but is fundamentally at peace with who you are without those achievements, right? And
And that's a scary thing to do because it forces you to go inwards and basically face, your demons. And I know we've all got
yeah,
demons. I've got plenty of that I'm constantly running away from, right?
which is more
That's
incentive to continue to work really hard. The
exactly, that's
harder
the
I
reason
work,
why.
the
Because then I
exhausted I
I
am. Yeah,
try to numb either numb their voices or deafen their voices, right?
Correct.
Um,
It's like your chocolate is actually productivity, right? Like people will go to ice cream to numb these feelings and not look at
yep,
their demons. You're just gonna add 10 things to your to-do list.
exactly,
Yeah.
basically.
So yeah.
So that being said, my brain is already going
I
into
absolutely do.
action, thinking, okay, so I think what you need now is a Sabbath. How and well, when are you gonna do it? This is how you're gonna do it. Step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah. So definitely, this is something that I can help you with. It is beyond the scope of one episode to solve all your problem and change your identity in 45 minutes. I wish I could do it, but I
Wouldn't that be
can't.
nice? Wouldn't that
It
be
would
nice
be.
to
It would
just
be great.
flip a switch and be like, you're fixed. Next one.
Listen, I would work a lot less and charge a lot more if I could do it in 45 minutes. So
True.
because I can't, there's different avenues for that.
But you
So
did put the finger on the problem. So that definitely is not unknown to me, nor is it strange, but it's coming from you hearing out just means that you identified the issue, the core issue, right?
perfect. So then just to kind of begin to close us off, why don't you summarize in your words, what did you come into here thinking was like the business issue or the problem that you had? And then what were any realizations or aha moments in your words?
Well, I feel like one, I wanted to have a different conversation than the normal conversation I normally have just on my podcast in general with event production that don't necessarily go under the hook, under the what is it called, the car hood, under the hood, right? To look at the issues that are sometimes fundamentally related to your upbringing or things that you didn't even think about, like for myself, and this has been work that I've done just recently, especially through my actually workouts. I've had plenty of sit down at the mind level where while my body's busy doing the reps and the workout, to think about the things that are stopping me from the next level. And one of the realization has been, as you mentioned, as you basically, I dotted the i's and um, did the t, whatever, how do you dash the t, whatever.
Mhm.
I totally messed that up. You basically identify the fact that a lot of the doing, a lot of the pursuing, a lot of the things that I constantly run into action for is related and is connected to this worthiness of feeling like I belong somewhere, feeling like I bring something to the table, and I constantly have to prove that again and again and again. And that expands beyond just myself and my personality. It kind of has a tangent into my business and the way it's run, and that is where things can easily fall apart if you're the only one on whose shoulders the whole foundation relies on. So moving forward, it is definitely important for me to acknowledge that I cannot be the only person that carries this whole thing. I need help. I need to let go of some of the responsibilities, some of the things that I know that there's plenty of talented individuals out there that can do them really, really well. If anything, focusing on one aspect of my business, it should help me actually move forward faster towards my goal. Sort of like, as you're saying, allowing rest in one area of my routine so I can accomplish the next stage better. And that has been a personal lesson for myself from this fitness, regime that I've been going through, to realize if I were to ever do this again, I'm knocking wood because that's definitely not on my mind right now. I now know what are the areas that I need to work on, and I need to allow to sip rest to seep through so I can perform better in the next stage over. And again, it goes back to my mentality of like, if it's hard, I'm gonna push through it really, really hard and see it to the end. But the problem with that is, what if it's really hard here, but then it's really, really, really hard the next stage, and then the next stage? How will you expand your stamina to last you the long way versus, short increments of burst and energy burst versus a long road type of thing, a long journey to keep going and to keep not burning out and not exhausting yourself in those bursts of energy that you expend, sometimes nuclear energy just to get one thing done.
Well, beautifully articulated and eloquently put, as expected. So yeah, I think it definitely makes sense to me. And again, I like how your brain went to like the tactical bits of like, well, and this is like, well, what I have to do, just make more time for recovery. But yes, that is totally fine. So why don't you just close us off then with letting everybody know, who's the best person to find you, where can they find you? Floor is yours for that.
Well, first off, thank you, Drasko, for the opportunity to, being on this show and talking to you. I found it very enlightening. Anyone that has not done this, I encourage you to do it, and I look forward to actually potentially having you coach me through some of those areas in which I struggle. And the fact that I admit that I struggle, it's a big deal. Okay, I need some brownie points or something for
Yeah.
anyone that
And
would.
just to be fair, full acknowledgement on, yeah, the courage and the vulnerability it does take to take ownership of that. Cause like, this is the pattern that's trying to protect like the most, fragile part of not just you, but us, of that
Yeah,
sense of like worthiness. I'm not good enough. So the fact that
yeah,
you can step up to a stranger in a public setting to dive into it and just begin to like peek inside, like what might be there. I think that's a testament to your readiness to like really explore it and heal it. And then two, just the courage it takes to get there. So 100% my respect is there. And I'm sure anybody else listening, plus all the, 100+ guests that have done the same thing as you. So you're in good company, is what I'm trying to say.
well, thank you for creating this platform, and I'm sure the conversations that are being had here are enlightening and amazing, and lots of takeaways for anyone that's struggling with their own version of, unraveling whatever that might be. To your question, for anyone that would like to connect with me, I am on LinkedIn, Anca Trifan, Trifan, and I do spell my name a little different than what my company name is, which is Trifan Events, Treefan Events. It's just a bit of a play on the pronunciation of my last name. That's why it's a little, confusing sometimes. But there's that. Also, I'm on Instagram, Trifan_events. If you want to follow my fitness journey, that's a completely different Instagram channel. I don't really share it with a whole lot of people, but it's fitness microblog. You can see that if I do get to place, maybe just cheer me. I am definitely excited about what's coming up next week. At the time of when this will go live, probably would have already happened. So I hope to have my sword.
You know what? If you do get the sword, send it back. I'll use that picture in like the
there you go. I'll be like
picture.
with
Yeah.
my sword. It's like I've got one too. Drasko's not the only one that has a sword.
That's true. Yeah. And you've earned that one a lot differently than I've earned this one. So to be fair,
There you go. So yeah, those are the main places that I hang at, and obviously my website, treefineevents.com. And then if you want to follow the podcast, eventsdemystified.com, the website, and Events Demystified podcast on all the major podcasting listening platforms, with wherever we're listening to your podcast.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much for that. This was a great conversation and such an important message, and glad for you sharing it. So, Anca, thank you very much for all of that. And for everybody else listening, as always, we'll see you on the next one.